GM just dropped a bombshell on the auto world. A brand new pickup truck, sleek, capable, and priced at just $10,000. Yeah, you heard that right. 10 grand. A pickup truck for less than the cost of a used Corolla. But what's the catch? Is this the start of GM's big comeback? Or just another marketing trick? Let's dive into what might be the most shocking automotive reveal of the decade. This is the Chevy Montana, GM's secret weapon that no one saw coming. For years, GM's been losing ground in the affordable truck market, while Ford and Toyota grabbed headlines with their midsize and compact pickups. But now, GM's firing back. A $10,000 pickup truck? That's not just a vehicle, that's a statement. When GM CEO Mary Barra unveiled the new Montana, jaws literally dropped. No electric gimmicks, no luxury price tag, just pure, simple utility. GM's message was clear. They're done sitting on the sidelines while Ford dominates with the Maverick and Toyota teases its stout revival. Instead, GM is saying, we're taking the fight global. So how in the world can GM sell a pickup for $10,000? Here's the thing. This isn't your typical Silverado. The Montana is a compact unibody pickup built with affordability and practicality in mind. It's smaller, lighter, and built using existing global platforms. GM isn't targeting ranchers or heavy haulers. They're going after everyday drivers, small business owners, and budget-conscious buyers who just want a reliable truck without selling a kidney. And GM's strategy? Simple manufacturing, shared parts, and no fluff. Narrator. The Chevy Montana isn't technically new. It's been quietly sold in South America for years, but now GM's taking that global model and refining it into something truly unique. A mini truck that's cheap, efficient, and surprisingly modern. It's a truck built for the next billion drivers, especially in emerging markets where affordability is everything. You get a practical four-door design, a short bed, modern infotainment, and, believe it or not, the same design DNA that runs through GM's global lineup. This is where things get interesting. GM's not just building a cheap truck, they're rewriting their global strategy. While American automakers are struggling with high EV costs and labor challenges, GM's quietly pivoting to volume markets. They're focusing on Latin America, Asia, and even Eastern Europe. Places where low-cost, durable vehicles can sell in massive numbers. And this could be a masterstroke. By leveraging its South American manufacturing base, GM keeps costs low, sidesteps US tariffs, and floods the global market with affordable utility vehicles. For the past few years, GM's been fighting battles on every front, from EV delays and battery plant issues to losing market share in key segments. But the Montana could be the spark GM needs. Instead of chasing Tesla in a race to the top, GM's diving into value territory, a space where demand is still huge and competition is surprisingly thin. They're rebuilding trust with consumers who feel priced out of the modern car market. A $10,000 truck says, "We hear you," and that's a powerful message. Now let's talk design. The new Montana looks surprisingly good for its price. Sporty front fascia, compact stance, and a practical bed that's built for light hauling. Inside, you'll find a simple but functional layout, digital display, smartphone connectivity, air conditioning, and modern safety features. Things you wouldn't expect on a budget pickup. Power-wise, the Montana comes with a small displacement engine, rumored to be around 1.2 to 1.3 liters turbocharged, delivering just enough muscle for daily tasks, not off-roading adventures. But here's the kicker. It's fuel efficient, reliable, and easy to maintain. If the Montana ever makes it to North America, this could shake up everything. Ford's Maverick starts around $25,000. The Santa Cruz? Even higher. A $10,000 truck instantly undercuts the entire market. It could force Ford, Toyota, and Hyundai to rethink pricing, and maybe even revive the lost era of simple, affordable pickups. GM might have just cracked the code on affordability. So what's powering this beast? Right now, the Montana uses a small turbo gas engine in its global form, but rumors suggest GM could explore a hybrid variant or even a flex fuel setup for different markets. The goal isn't raw horsepower, it's efficiency, versatility, and cost control. This might just be the anti-EV vehicle for markets that aren't ready for full electrification yet. Now here's the big question everyone's asking. Will Americans actually get it? Because let's be real, a $10,000 pickup truck in the US sounds almost too good to be true. Regulations, safety standards, and union labor costs could easily double that price. But GM knows there's demand. People are tired of $60,000 Silverados and expensive EV trucks. They want something simple, practical, and affordable again. And if GM can find a way to bring the Montana here, maybe assembled in Mexico or Brazil, it could completely upend the compact pickup market. But this isn't just about one truck. This is about a shift in the entire auto industry. And that's where things get really interesting. What this means for the auto industry could be massive. For years, car makers have been chasing the premium market, building bigger, fancier, and more expensive vehicles. Trucks that used to start at $25,000 now start at $50,000. The average American can't even afford a new vehicle anymore. And now, GM is flipping the table. They're saying, what if we go back to basics? What if we build something that ordinary people can actually buy? It's a wake-up call, not just for GM's competitors, but for the entire auto industry. Because here's the truth, the next big automotive revolution might not come from EVs or self-driving cars. It might come from affordability. People want vehicles that make sense again, that fit their budgets, their lifestyles, and their roads. And that's exactly what the Montana represents. But GM isn't stopping there. The Montana could be the first domino in a much bigger strategy, one that reshapes how GM builds, sells, and prices its vehicles worldwide. For years, automakers like Ford, Toyota, and Stellantis have been milking profits from bigger, pricier trucks. GM's move threatens to pull the rug out from under that entire system. Because if consumers start demanding simplicity, everyone's high-margin lineup suddenly looks bloated and outdated. And yet there's something poetic about it. An old-school American brand going back to its roots, building something affordable, honest, and useful. It's almost nostalgic, but it's also incredibly strategic. Because while the rest of the world races toward luxury EVs and autonomous tech, GM might be quietly positioning itself to own the other half of the future. The half where practicality still matters more than prestige. Imagine millions of Montanas flooding roads across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Brand loyalty building from the ground up. GM becoming the people's automaker again, not through high-tech gimmicks, but through accessibility. That's the long game. That's what this $10,000 pickup could represent. But as GM moves deeper into this new frontier, there's one big question no one has an answer to yet. How sustainable is it? Can GM actually maintain quality, safety, and reliability at this price? Or will the Montana end up being another cheap experiment that fades into history once reality catches up? Those answers are still unclear. But one thing's for sure, GM has changed the conversation. The Montana has forced every automaker, analyst, and buyer to stop and think about what a vehicle should really cost. And in doing so, GM might have sparked a movement that even they can't fully control. Because once the world gets a taste of affordable mobility again, there's no going back. Consumers won't just want cheaper vehicles, they'll expect them, and that expectation could reshape the entire automotive landscape faster than anyone's ready for. Some say GM is taking a massive risk, others think it's the smartest thing they've done in years. Either way, the industry won't be the same after this, and if history tells us anything, revolutions like this never stay quiet for long. And deep down, you can feel it. Now, this isn't just another truck launch. This is the start of something bigger, something that could change how cars are built, who they're built for, and what they cost. Because when a century-old automaker suddenly decides to build a $10,000 pickup truck, it's not just innovation, it's a declaration of war. The real motives behind GM's price war might go deeper than anyone realizes. On the surface, it looks like a bold play to reclaim market share and win back working-class buyers. But behind closed doors, this might be about survival and positioning for a future where global demand, not luxury margins, decides who lives and who dies. GM knows the EV transition hasn't gone as planned. Production costs are still high, profit margins are razor thin, and consumer demand in the US is cooling faster than anyone expected. The Montana represents a strategic pivot, a return to what made GM powerful in the first place: mass production, affordability, and scale. It's not about chasing Tesla anymore. It's about reminding the world that GM can still build vehicles for everyone. Inside GM's boardroom, the message is clear: diversify or disappear. If electric vehicles can't sustain the company's global footprint, something something else has to, and that something might just be a wave of low-cost combustion and hybrid models that dominate the developing world. The Montana could be the blueprint, a truck simple enough to build anywhere, cheap enough to sell everywhere, and profitable enough to keep GM alive while the rest of the industry scrambles to figure out what's next. But this move is also political. It sends a quiet but powerful message to governments and unions. GM doesn't have to rely solely on expensive, over-regulated US production lines. They can build their future somewhere else and still win. It's leverage, plain and simple. If negotiations or policies make building affordable vehicles impossible in the States, GM can point to the Montana and say, look what we can do abroad. At the same time, it's a warning shot to competitors who got too comfortable at the top. Behind the scenes, rival automakers are already scrambling to respond. Ford executives are quietly running cost analyses to see if a stripped-down version of the Maverick could even exist at a price that competes. Toyota's engineers are rushing to finalize the long-rumored Stout project, a compact pickup designed for efficiency and mass appeal. And in South Korea, Hyundai's team is reportedly holding late-night meetings about whether the Santa Cruz needs a complete redesign to stay relevant. The ripple effect has started. What GM did with one truck has now triggered a global rethink of pricing strategy, manufacturing models, and consumer psychology. Nobody wants to be the last company selling $40,000 compact trucks in a world where GM just proved it could be done for 10. In Japan, industry insiders say Nissan is even considering reviving older platforms from the Datsun era. Simple, reliable, easy-to-build vehicles that could be modernized just enough for today's emissions and safety standards. The fact that legacy automakers are even talking about resurrecting minimalist design philosophy tells you how serious this shift really is. At the same time, Chinese automakers are watching closely. Companies like BYD, Great Wall, and Chery have already been dominating low-cost markets with small pickups and crossovers. But now that GM is entering their price zone, they might see it as a challenge or an invitation to fight back harder. The next battle could happen not in America or Europe, but in the developing world, where every dollar counts and affordability wins. The strange thing is, even investors seem confused. GM's stock spiked after the Montana reveal, but analysts are split. Some see it as a bold expansion into untapped markets. Others fear it could drag down profits, create internal conflicts with GM's luxury and EV divisions, and potentially start a race to the bottom that no one can sustain. But that's the thing about disruption. It never looks safe when it starts. It looks reckless. It looks risky, until suddenly it's the new normal. And GM seems perfectly fine with being the one to light that fuse. It's mobility without financial ruin, and that message resonates far beyond South America. Even in the United States, where vehicles have become status symbols instead of necessities, people are waking up. They're tired of $900 a month car payments, dealer markups, and tech features that break after 2 years. They want something real again, a truck that just works. And suddenly, the Montana looks like a symbol of that rebellion, but not everyone is celebrating. Industry insiders are warning that this kind of pricing could unleash chaos. If consumers start demanding vehicles at these prices, it could crush profit margins across the board. Automakers built their entire business models on high-margin SUVs and EVs. A global shift toward affordable utilitarian vehicles could wreck those plans overnight. Yet there's no denying the momentum. The Montana isn't just a truck, it's a message, a signal that the era of overpriced vehicles might finally be ending. And if that message spreads to North America, GM could find itself leading a new kind of automotive revolution. One that values simplicity over flash and practicality over prestige. Behind the scenes, GM's leadership knows this move isn't about short-term profits, it's about long-term dominance. They're thinking globally, not locally. They see where the real growth is, in developing markets where millions of drivers are buying their first vehicles. The Montana is their ticket into that world, and they're betting it'll pay off big. Still, there's one major unknown: how far GM is willing to push this experiment, because if they truly want to take the Montana global, they'll have to overcome mountains of regulatory red tape, safety standards, and environmental rules. Bringing that $10,000 price tag to the US might be impossible without major compromises. But what if they find a loophole? What if GM finds a way to build or assemble the Montana just across the border, close enough to sell in America, but cheap enough to keep the price low? That's when the real disruption would begin. It would send shockwaves not only through the auto industry, but through American manufacturing itself. It's small enough for city driving, rugged enough for light work, and cheap enough to appeal to global markets. It's not trying to be a Silverado, it's trying to be everything the modern driver needs and nothing more. But if GM is really serious about shaking up the market, they can't stop here. The Montana might be the opening shot, but what comes next will determine everything. Will GM bring this low-cost revolution to North America? Will they risk clashing with unions, safety regulators, and their own high-end truck lineup to give consumers what they've been begging for? Because if they do, it won't just disrupt the market, it'll redefine it. And if they don't, well, someone else will. The race for the world's most affordable pickup has begun, but behind that race lies a much deeper question. One that could decide the future of the entire auto industry. Is this the dawn of a new era for GM, or the start of a global price war they can't win? The global fallout from GM's $10,000 pickup announcement was immediate. Within days, analysts, journalists, and rival automakers were all scrambling to understand what just happened. Social media exploded with disbelief. Some called it genius. Others said it was impossible. And quietly, inside boardrooms from Detroit to Tokyo, panic started to set in. Ford executives reportedly held emergency meetings to discuss whether a cheaper version of the Maverick could even be built without losing money. Toyota insiders hinted that the long-rumored Stout might need to be rushed to market sooner than planned. Even Hyundai and Nissan began re-evaluating their small truck strategies. The shockwave was real, and it was global, because in one announcement, GM had exposed the dirty secret of the modern auto industry. Cars don't need to be this expensive. Companies made them that way, and now one of the oldest automakers in America just proved it. GM's gamble is forcing everyone to rethink what value means. In emerging markets, a $10,000 truck isn't just affordable, it's freedom. It's the ability for families and small business owners to finally own something that works, lasts, and doesn't drown them in debt. Closing underperforming plants and shifting focus to regions where production costs are dramatically lower. By tapping into existing platforms, simplified supply chains, and fewer luxury components, GM can produce vehicles at a fraction of US manufacturing costs, without sacrificing too much quality. But here's the twist. GM's strategy doesn't just rely on cheap labor or parts. They're betting on something far bigger: scalability. They know that if they can build a truck for $10,000 in Brazil or Mexico, they can eventually modify that same platform for other regions, tweak the features, meet safety standards, and still undercut everyone else. It's a global chess move, not a local gamble. What's even more intriguing is how this approach positions GM against China's growing dominance in the affordable car segment. Chinese automakers have been flooding markets in Asia, Africa, and South America with budget vehicles that cost half of what Western brands charge. GM is clearly saying, not so fast. They're reclaiming territory before it's too late, using the Montana as their frontline weapon. And if this plan works, it could change everything. It could make GM one of the few American automakers that still thrives in the low-cost global market, a space Detroit abandoned decades ago in pursuit of luxury margins. But let's be real, this move isn't without risk, because while a $10,000 pickup sounds like a dream for consumers, it's a nightmare for competitors. If GM proves they can profit off ultra-affordable vehicles, it will force everyone else, Ford, Stellantis, even Toyota, to make tough choices. Do they chase GM into this price war, or keep focusing on expensive EVs that fewer and fewer people can afford? This could be the start of a massive industry split, affordable versus aspirational. On one side, brands selling trucks and cars normal people can actually buy. On the other, companies chasing luxury margins and electric hype. And that divide could decide who survives the next decade of automotive chaos. What makes the Montana